So we're going to talk DocuSign today, and we are going to talk from start to finish. So hopefully I am able to finish this in the hour. I feel like I will be able to. And if we need to stay a little late, that is totally fine by me. So you should be seeing my screen. So we're going to start in command. So you always start in command. You never start in DocuSign. That's important. So we're logged in. Briefly, I'm just going to show you how to tell if your DocuSign is connected to your account. So you're going to go to the top right, which could be underneath everybody's pictures. If you're using, like, obviously you're on Zoom, it likes to put the pictures over on the right hand side. So if you ever can't see my cursor, you can move the pictures around. It's not necessary that you see my face for this, so feel free just to completely get rid of the thumbnails on the side. So go to your settings, and if you've connected DocuSign, then you're going to see it in your connected apps. Okay? So you'll notice that once hers is loaded, so here's DocuSign, and our status is connected. Okay? And so that's important. If your DocuSign is not connected, then you're not going to be able to have the functions that you need. So in order to make that happen, you have to create your DocuSign account, and then you have to connect it to your command. There are videos on how to do that in the DocuSign study guide that I've sent out every morning, but that's your first step. And unfortunately, we just won't have time to get into that during this class today. But feel free to ask somebody in leadership if you're having any trouble with that. So I'm going to go to my opportunities, which is the handshake icon. And we're just going to start from scratch. So you always begin by starting your opportunity. So you don't begin by starting a room in DocuSign. And a room is a loop. They're like the same thing. So I'll create my opportunity on the right-hand side. And a lot of it's going to auto-populate for you. And we just need to fill in the stuff that's required. So we'll keep it as a listing. My test client her name is Wendy Bird, which you may recognize from the Netflix show, which is Ozark. And we always name our opportunities with the address. And since this is a listing, I would know that. So 123 Street. And then you have to put your commission rate, and that is all that's required. So you want to use your client here, right? And so all of the contact information you have put in for your client in command will sync to DocuSign. And then your opportunity name will also be your room name. So we'll create. Okay, so the details section in DocuSign will sync to, I'll show you, there's also a details section in DocuSign. So the one in command and the one in DocuSign will, all of that information will sync over. So the more updated you keep this page, the more updated your DocuSign will be. Okay? But mostly we're going to be hanging out here in the document section. So real quick, it's important to have the difference between command and DocuSign straight in your head. Okay? So command is how you submit documents to the Market Center for compliance, and it's how you get paid for your commissions. Okay? DocuSign is how you submit documents to your clients and receive signatures. So those are two different functions. So it's important to know that the Market Center is not going to have access to your DocuSign room. This is different than .loop. So when compliance goes to check for your documents, if they're not in command, we're not going to be able to find them. So it's even more important now that you're using command at a high level. So we'll pick our checklist type. We will pick residential. Okay. And then, so we have all of our documents here, all of the spots for when we need. And we're going to start our transaction, which is at the top right. So when we click this down arrow, right now, Joanne has both .loop and DocuSign synced to her command. And you may also still have both. And so this is really important. You can only choose one or the other for each opportunity. So if you decide to start with DocuSign, you can't change your mind later and decide to go with dotloop. Okay, you would have to lose the opportunity and start from scratch in order for them to be connected. So it's important that you take your time when making this decision. So obviously for this class, we're gonna sync to DocuSign. And that is going to open up another tab, which will be DocuSign. Unless you're like me and you have a pop-up blocker, then it'll be blocked. DocuSign makes you log in almost every time, so make sure that you have your password memorized or saved, because you will find that you have to log in at least once per day. And I have yet to find that Google Chrome will auto-populate my password. I've had to type it in every time. Okay, so this is DocuSign, right? So it's gonna open up into the document section. And so up here, these are your options for within your room. So we'll see that the name is the same as what it is in command. And we're gonna pop over to the left to the detail section. I'm gonna point out a couple things to you here. Okay, so this is the detail section. To edit, you would press on the top right, there's an edit button with a little pencil icon. Okay, so you wanna add your clients to the detail section. So you'll notice that Wendy, my client that I added to my command, for some reason she did not auto-populate. So that must mean that they are in the midst of some updates. So ideally this would have auto-populated from my command. That's okay, so I'll put her in and I will put her husband, which is Marty. And you'll notice that I'm using my personal emails because this is a test room. And so that way I can see what it looks like. Then as you scroll down, listing agent would be me, or Joanne technically. And then as you scroll further, there's a spot for listing 2. And then here are the buyers. So if you ended up wanting to be able to send documents to your buyers, once you know who they are, you could add them in here. So that would be totally up to you. And then the buyer agent as well. Now it's always in this order. So when you have a buyer, you're gonna have to scroll all the way down to here to get to your buyer information. Okay, so it's very consistent in that the listing, the sellers are always first and then the buyers. This section of DocuSign is where they're gonna pull the information to auto-populate in your forms. So anything that you know is typically going to be pulled into forms, you may want to make sure is filled out. So for example, the address, as you scroll down, you get to things like the earnest money amount, you get to the contract date, right? So some of that will be helpful to fill out because it'll auto-populate into your different documents. Okay? So this is the detail section. Okay? And remember, we edit up here.
So Kayla?
Yeah, go ahead.
Obviously, if this is a listing, we're not going to know that data.
Right.
So that comes up later that we'd fill that in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just keep this as updated as possible. One, for your own records, but also just to, that way it populates into forms for you.
Okay, so, but it wouldn't, it wouldn't, what do you call that? Like rewrite anything. Like you already have signatures for your listing agreement, obviously. You've got your residential property disclosure form already. And you've sent it to your client, you got their signatures. Then you're going to add the buyers to that only if, I mean, would you add your buyers to that? I guess you would if you're a dual agent, but otherwise. which
Right. It won't change anything that you already have signatures on. So
okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, DocuSign like locks a document once it's signed. You can't
Okay,
change it anymore.
gotcha. Thank you.
Great question. So with that, we're going to move over to the documents portion. This is probably where you're going to hang out the most. Okay. You'll hang out the most in documents and also in envelopes. Now, in between, there's people, and we'll talk about that later, but you don't necessarily need to add your clients to the people section, and their information can be pulled from the details. So don't feel like you have to add them there. DocuSign will also send them an email when you add them in people. And so some agents that I've talked to find that confusing because they don't want their clients to be getting an email from DocuSign with nothing to sign. So you don't need to add your clients there. So in the documents, you're going to go to add. And unless you have a subscription to ZipForm, you're most likely going to be using one of these top two options at all times. So to add something from a computer would be a saved file that you got in an email or that you scan to yourself. And a DocuSign form is going to be an interactive form that's fillable. So those are probably going to be the two that you use the most. So we're going to start with the DocuSign form. So when you click that, you'll be taken to a screen that looks like this. And this is how you access all of the already templated forms from DocuSign. So if you were to stay in the DocuSign forms library, like it's auto-populated here, and then you come down to select library, you're going to see that the forms are separated by their source. So the Columbus Board, the Ohio Association, or Keller Williams. And if you clicked on those, then you would be able to pick and choose whichever forms that you wanted. You could also, up here, switch from DocuSign Forms Library to Group. And then when you select your group, you'll see that we've made a buyer packet and a listing packet. So we'll choose listing since this is a listing, and you'll see that it's a mix of different like CBOR and Keller Williams and Ohio Association forms. So we've pulled them all together. Now, these aren't all of the forms you would ever need for a listing, but they're the most popular ones. So you may still need to go up here and go back to the library to find some of those more nuanced forms. And you'll notice that there is a search bar here, so you can search for things. Like if I wanted this COVID one, I could start typing COVID, and those are the only ones that'll show. So that's also helpful. So in this stage, depending on your own personal workflow, you could select all, or you could just pick and choose. So I'm just going to pick and choose. I'm going to do the agency, and what else should we do? I'll do lead-based paint. We'll add those. I am excited to tell you that the RPD is now been templated correctly. We've been waiting for DocuSign to make some fixes, and they finally did. So that one is also ready to go, which is very exciting. So you'll notice this icon here, the blue form. Okay, so that just tells you that this is not a PDF, right? It's not static, it's interactive. So if I were to click on it, it's going to pop up, and I can actually start typing in that document. So I can type, I can press tab to go to the next one. Right? And then you'll notice the signature boxes here don't have anything in there. And this is where I find that some people panic because they're like, no, how does my client sign it? And that's actually going to be done later. Okay, so it's not done yet. Right now, you're just kind of filling out the form with the stuff that you want like printed on there for your client to see. Okay. It is very important that you press save and close and not the X button for obvious reasons. I've been burned by this many times before, so learn from me. You must save and close. And so to DocuSign something is to send it to your clients. So once you filled out the form, you would then hover over it and click this circle. And then this button up here, these kind of pop up, these options here. Your middle one, the pen icon, is the DocuSign icon. That is how you send it to your clients. We can also send multiple documents at once. So I'll hover, choose that. And I can also DocuSign them both at the same time. So Sarah Beth, I'm going to answer your question about dot loop that you put in the chat more towards the end so that we can keep going here. So I'll DocuSign. And your next vocabulary word is an envelope, okay? So an envelope, you can think of it as like an actual physical envelope, right? So I have written the form, I'm putting it in the envelope so I can send it to my clients. Okay, so this screen that you see is the screen that you use to personalize your envelope as much as you'd like. I would recommend very highly that you always change the envelope name. Right, so you could change it to anything that you want, like maybe I can say like listing docs round 1, right? Or you could say pre-listing docs, you can say contract docs, you can say whatever you want, but something that's going to tell you what are these documents that are in here. And I'll kind of show you why that's important here in a little bit. So then here are my documents. If I had a preference of the order, say I don't want them to look at the team disclosure first. I want them to look at the lead-based paint. I could just switch them like that. Or I could just leave everything. Here, add recipients, this is where you add your clients. So you're always going to add as pre-tagged roles if you have the option. Okay, so what that means is that the makers of these forms already put in signature boxes for you, and you're going to tell DocuSign what boxes go with which person. So I'm going to choose pre-tagged roles, and I'm going to see that I have the option to tag sellers, buyers, a listing agent, and a buyer agent. Now, I am the listing side, so I'm going to tag my sellers. So I'm going to choose this drop down, and I find Wendy Bird. This is pulling up everybody that I put in that detail section. I'm going to choose seller 2 is Marty Bird, and then I'll put myself as the listing agent. And I'm not going to tag anyone else because I don't know them, right? And I don't need them right now. But in a situation where you did want everyone's signatures, you could put everybody in there. So add selected, and they're all going to pop up here. So you can do so many things right now. So all of these are needs to sign, right? Which is what I want, but I could change it to just needs to view it or receives a copy. So if you have an admin or you have a transaction coordinator, you can always add them as viewing or receiving a copy so that they're kept in the know for your transactions. You can also, in this more option, you can add a password or a private message. So that's access authentication is a fancy word for password. And then this column here with the ones, so this is neat. So I like to call these waves. So these number ones mean that all 3 of these people are going to receive these documents in the first wave, all at the same time. But if for some reason I wanted myself, Joanne, to not sign these until I've made sure that both of my clients have signed them, I can change my 1 to a 2, and now I'm going to get it in the second wave. So I'm not going to get this until Wendy and Marty both sign it. So this is really useful. Like a couple of business examples I can think of off the top of my head. First, the mutual release. You need Lori's signature, but you don't need it until everyone else has signed it. So you could put her in a second wave. you have admins or transaction coordinators that need to upload your documents once they're all signed. So I can put them as the last wave, and I can just say that they receive a copy. So then they know everything's signed. I can put this in command. You can also use it for the purchase contract, right? I want my buyers to sign, and as soon as my buyers have signed, I want a copy of this to go to the listing agent. So that's another way. So those are like 3 examples I can think of off the top of my head, but that's how those numbers work down there. And then as you scroll down, this is your message. So this is what actually goes out to your clients to their email, right? So please DocuSign from Kayla, right? And you can put whatever you want in there. You could put due dates. You could put, I don't know, congratulations, like love working with you, see you Friday, whatever. Okay. So that's the envelope page. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Okay, so say you wanted to save and close, you could do that. If you're like, oh, I'm not ready to send this just yet, you can save it here. You can also go to actions and just delete it. If for some reason you're like, oh, they've changed their mind or something and you don't want to keep it. But most likely you're going to press next. And that's going to take you to the add fields portion. All right, so first up is the lead-based paint. So you'll see up here, Wendy is in yellow, which means that everything that is in yellow is going to go to Wendy. Marty is in blue, which means that everything that is in blue is going to go to Marty. And me, Joanne, is in purple. Right? So that's how you would toggle through. And notice as I change, these colors change, right? Because it matters if I'm going to drag something, if I'm going to drag this full name and it's in blue, that means it's going to put Marty's name in there. Okay, so just the colors are important. But I'm going to delete this. So I'm going to click it, I'm going to delete it. So when it's a DocuSign form, you honestly shouldn't have to do much in this. Right here, you're just kind of scrolling through and you're making sure it looks good, right? They have their initials where they need to be, and you're just kind of looking through it, right? As I scroll down, here's my team disclosure. There's everything I typed, and there are Wendy and Marty's signatures there. So a couple of things, you'll notice if they're filled in like this, that means that it's required. And I'll just uncheck this on the right-hand side. If it's not required, it's going to be outlined. So that's a visual way for you to know what's required and what's not. But you can change everything. So like say you wanted to make this, all of this required, you could click and drag, select everything, and on the right-hand side, make them all required. Okay, meaning they have to do everything, right? No options, right? Just because DocuSign has done the work on this doesn't mean that you can't edit it, right? There's also an undo at the top, right? Okay. And so then if you wanted to look at what it looks like for your clients, you could use recipient preview. But if you were ready to go, you would just press send and it would just go. So I'll pause for questions if anyone has them. Okay. So I will send this. Okay, so you'll notice now I'm back in the envelope section. So this is why I told you to make sure to change the name in your in your envelopes, because notice here is that title that I made, Listing Docs Round 1. Oh, I clicked it. If it had just said please DocuSign, then like literally every single envelope that ends up in my room is going to say please DocuSign, and I won't be able to tell which one's which without clicking on them. So that's why that's important. When I do click on the envelope, it's going to give me more details. It's going to tell me currently I'm waiting for both Wendy and Marty to sign these. And then after that, waiting, Joanne's going to get it. Okay. I can resend it if for some reason my clients say they didn't get it. I can make corrections, which is only allowed if they haven't signed it yet. And I can also void it, make a copy of it, view the documents here. Okay. I'm going to go back to the document section. Okay. So when your clients do sign these, you're going to see a copy, another version of, like when they sign the team disclosure, there will pop up another team disclosure that's a PDF with their signatures on it, and it's going to have a nice big green check mark on it so that you know that it's signed. Okay. And so that's going to be real visual for you there. So we'll add a PDF. So in this instance, the other agent has sent me an email. I've scanned something to, I can't see, I have too many things open. I've scanned something to myself or whatever. So I'm uploading just a PDF. So you'll already notice that here, the PDF icon, so that tells me that this document is not something that I can edit, okay? It's just static, right? And if I click on it, I can view it and see what it is, but I'm not gonna be able to type in it, right? I'm not gonna be able to type anything because it's not interactive. But I can still DocuSign it. So if I click it, that check mark, I remember I hover and then click the check mark, and then I click DocuSign, I can put it in an envelope. So I'll go a little quicker through this one because we've already kind of talked a lot about this. So when you're adding recipients to a PDF, you'll notice that pre-tagged roles is not an option. And that's because this isn't interactive, so there's nothing that's been tagged. So I would choose room participants here, and I would just check the ones I want to add to this envelope. I could also, when I add recipients, use email address. And for example, that would be like the great way to add our good old broker, H. Lorraine. Because you don't have to really add her to your room, but if you need her signature, you could just put her email in. But I'm not actually going to blow up her email, so I'm going to X her out. So Kelly asked, how do I add text to a PDF, which is a great question, and I am going to show you that. You would do that in the next portion. I mean, you can always add text to a PDF using another program like Adobe Acrobat, or if you're on a Mac, to use Preview, but you can add text in DocuSign if you want. So let's go next, and I'll show you. Also, you may be wondering why DocuSign is so slow, and that's because I have dropped my computer twice in the last month. Okay. So here we go. So you can do so much in this part of DocuSign. It's crazy. So look over here, right? So Marty's yellow, Wendy's blue. I can put all of these fields anywhere I want on this document, right? So if I was, so like we already saw, the lead-based paint is already in there, right? But let's pretend that it wasn't, and we're having to make it ourselves, right? these parts are for initials, so I can just drag my initial over for Marty, and I can drag my initial over for Wendy. Okay, I can put in their names or their emails there. I can add my radio options, which is like your one or the other boxes, right? And remember, everything that's filled in is required. Anything that's outlined is not, so that's important. And then here, if we needed to add text, so Kelly asked, how do you add text? You drag a text box over, and you can make it as big as you want, and you can type whatever text. I want to type this here, okay? And most likely, if you're adding text, you're not going to want it to be required by your client. You're going to want it to most likely be read-only, meaning they can't edit it. And you don't want it to be required because then they have to like click on it. And then this is a little short pro tip. If you had text that you know you're going to be adding like all of the time, you can save it as a custom field here. And you can put like, you know, text box. And then every single time you need it, it's now going to be here in this second option, customs fields, and you can just drag it over every time. So if it's something that you know you're going to be using every time, like your name, phone number, or like a clause that you use a lot in the purchase contract, you can do that. So that's an option. Important note, so notice that our text box is outlined in blue, which means it's Wendy. Okay, that means that only Wendy can see this, unless I go on the right-hand side and I scroll down to collaboration and I say recipients can collaborate. Okay, that's now going to mean that Marty can also see this text box. So if you need multiple people to see it, you want to check the collaboration box. So you might want to make a note of that. Okay. And then for their signatures, you would drag a signature box. If you are particularly like interested in everything looking really good, you would want the line inside the signature box to line up with the bottom line in the actual document. And then anytime you have a signature box, you also need to drag over a date signed. Okay, so they need to go together. Okay, and then you would switch over from Wendy to Marty. You would put his signature. Can also like make them smaller if you want them to like perfectly fit in here. And pull a date signed.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do they have to click on the date sign or is that automatic?
No, it's automatic. That's a great question. It will like use the device that they're on and it'll pull the date and time from that device into that box.
Okay.
Great question. Okay. So let's go to recipient preview so that we can see. I would almost always use this if you're building something from scratch. That way you can make sure you didn't forget anything. So you'll notice you can view it as different people. Is there an Julie asked in the chat, is there an activity log with timestamps? I believe so. Let's look at that.
Sorry.
So we see that here's Marty's initials. Here's that text box that I added. Right, and here is his signature. And notice here, the time and date has auto-populated for me. It just pulled it from my computer. Okay. And then if I switched from Marty to Wendy, we will see, drum roll. Moral of the story, kids, don't drop your computer. Okay. Here's Wendy. Here's her little radio dials and her signature. Okay. So I would recommend using the recipient preview, especially at the beginning when we're getting used to this. That might be good to make sure that you built it correctly. Okay. Then you can close that. And then when you're ready to go, just again, you would send it. But before that, the only thing you would need outside of this standard fields, this first option, is if you go down to the pencil, that's where you're going to find the line. So if you're ever needing to strike something out, like cross it out, you would drag and drop the line. Okay, like that. Leslie, you're asking about the MLS number in this form specifically. Yes, you would need to add that. I will be honest, I don't necessarily make compliant documents when I do my class. So yes, you would need to add a text box there. So good catch. So the line here, right, that's going to be for any time you're crossing something out. And then you can go back up to the standard fields to add the text box to replace whatever it is that you're saying. Okay. So before I get out of here, does anyone else have any other questions on how to build a document from scratch? Awesome.
Actually, I do. Yeah. What was that feature again, to make sure that everybody can see the same information?
It's going to be you click it, anything, like even these radio buttons. Mm-hmm. And on the right-hand side, you're going to go to collaboration. Okay. And you're going to check recipients can collaborate.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Okay. So I will send this, and then Julie, we're going to come back to your question about the time logs, because I think I know where that is. So we're going to click on the envelope because, so Julie, for your question, so when they sign, the time and date that they sign will pop up here. And then also, if you go to more, there's the view envelope history, which is going to show you everything here. So this says, Marty Bird received the envelope, today at 2:45.
Okay. So you'll be able to tell, because I often want to do that to make sure that they've received it, to make sure that they've opened,
Yes. Yeah. And I could even, let me open it on my,
you'll be able to tell that
personal email and see how that, I'll go ahead and sign it and we'll see how that changes the history. And that's also good for I know that a lot of things are time sensitive. So right. You could see exactly when something was sent to a listing agent. You could see stuff like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now bear with me. I am signing as Mr. Marty Bird right now. Okay. So I just signed it as Marty. So I'm going to refresh this page. And I refreshed it too fast. Okay, so here we go. So Marty Bird, which is me on my phone, just signed on at 2:47. Ooh, and it even gives me the seconds. So down to the moment, right? And then if I go to view envelope history, I can see, here's what you were saying, Julie. Here he viewed the envelope at 2:47, and he signed it also at 2:47 because I did it super quick. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the DocuSign portion. So I am next going to show you how to get it into Command. But before I do, if anyone had any other questions about the DocuSign, the screen we're looking at right now, this would be a good time.
So I had watched a video from somewhere and about this stuff, and they had pulled in the listing information. Oh, well, you know what? I don't even know. Forget that question. Never mind. How about, is there anything different? I suppose it's the same for a buyer client. Is there anything that would make this?
Yeah, pretty much the same. You would just use the buyer packet instead of the listing packet whenever you were pulling your documents in. But other than that, I mean, that I am not a real estate agent, as you all know, so there could be something different that I'm just not seeing, but everything functions the same regardless.
Well, you know what? I ran into something weird, and maybe it's because I didn't follow the process. I tried to figure it out without looking. You know how we realtors are. We never really want to go through this excruciating learning curve.
Right.
So, but the documents were, I was unable. They were like grayed. The little circle was gray, and I couldn't check the box.
Okay. That happens when you already have it in your room. So let's look.
Aha.
So like that?
Yep, exactly.
So that just means that I already have it in there. And so it doesn't let you add it multiple times.
Gotcha.
So let me show you. I just signed as Wendy Bird as well. So I should now have a second team disclosure or lead-based paint. Yeah. So I wanted to show you guys what it looks like when your clients actually sign something. So here, notice this green icon signed. So this is the lead-based paint disclosure 1 signed, which is the same name as this guy, right? So that means that the green one, is the signed version of this, right? So when I click it, you're gonna actually see all of your signatures. Here, which I did not sign them very pretty, as you can see. So this one, the signed one, is the one that you want to put into Command, right? You don't want to put the blank one into Command. So the only difference when we get to Command is that you're going to see the word signed in there. So that's important to note, that it's important that you pull the correct document in. Okay? So this allows me to make edits here, right? Because I have the signed version. So when I just said you can't put multiples of the same document into your room, you might have immediately been thinking of things like the purchase contract and the like addendums to the purchase contract. Like sometimes you have multiple versions of that, right? So you can still go back in and edit the original interactive form, because when your client signs something, it makes it as a copy.
Oh, that's kind of nice, actually.
Yeah, so you don't actually need to upload a second one. You just change everything. You go into the addendum, you change it to addendum 2, and then you send it. You can archive. Julie asked, can I archive the unsigned document? You can. That will make it look really nice and clean. So I'm going to click it, and then the archive is this cabinet looking one. So I can archive it, and that'll kind of make it go, and then that'll make it say archived here. But we'll find that it'll still pop up in your command. So also it's refreshing for some reason, but it'll also pop up in your command still, even though it's archived. So it makes your room a little bit easier to see, because I can go from all documents up here to just active, and that's going to get rid of that archive. But it's still going to pop up in your command. A workaround that you may like, and this is I'm starting to get to something that's kind of totally personal and totally up to you. If you wanted to come to actions, you could create a folder, and you could make that folder signed documents if you would like, or you could use this for anything really. And you can take that signed document and click and drag up there. Oh my gosh. Don't be like this. I think my computer screen is a little too small. Well, you could click and drag, or you can select and move. Since it didn't want me to just move it, but you can physically drag it. My computer just doesn't want to for some reason. You could make it a separate folder, and then that folder will pop up in your command. So that's an option as well.
Is the current display the best versus like we're looking at up here on the top right under actions? It looks like you have things in a list form versus whatever.
Yeah, totally up to you. I personally like my Google Drive looks like this because I like it better. But some people I know like to be able to see the document, so they would prefer that way.
Okay. Well, I think I like the list, but okay.
Yeah, I like it better too, to be honest. Okay, so now how do I get this to compliance so that I can get paid, right? So I go back to command. So remember, command is how you talk to the market center. DocuSign is how you talk to your clients. I go back to command, and what do I have? Lead-based paint. And I scroll down to lead-based paint, and I press add file. And I'm going to switch from manual to DocuSign. And I'm going to see that I have this folder here, signed documents. And here at the end, it says signed. So that's how I know that it's the right one. So I would click it, and I would assign it. And now it's in command. And then when I was ready, I would submit to the market center up here. But obviously I'm not going to do that to our compliance people. Okay. So going all the way back to Sarah Beth's original question, which was, do we have to bring all our loops from .loop over to DocuSign? The answer to that would be no. The reason being that you will still have the option to see all of your old loops in .loop after our contract ends, right? And the market center does not have a preference of where your documents are, as long as they're submitted to command for compliance. Now, if you have a transaction that's kind of awkward, it's in the middle, and your .loop contract is going to expire before it closes, I would just make sure that all of your signed documents are put into command. And then what you're going to have to do is use DocuSign for the rest of your transaction to get any other document signed that you may need. Okay? So Sarah Beth, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? We pretty much have covered the basics from beginning to end.